Red skies weep over Dromund Kaas. I remember the day they came for me. Not stormtroopers or military men, but something worse. A figure in black whose face I never saw, accompanied by Imperial officials with datapads and cold, appraising eyes. I was 8 years old. My mother wept silently as they spoke of potential, of power, of destiny. My father stood rigid, pride and terror warring across his weathered face. There was no choice to be made. Not really. The Empire had identified me as Force-sensitive, and Lord Senex required an apprentice. They permitted me one small bag, no keepsakes, no toys, practical items only. The journey from our modest homestead on Dantooine to the Sith Academy on Dromund Kaas remains a blur of hyperspace streaks and silent meals. The officials never spoke directly to me, only about me. Subject exhibits promising attributes. Subject requires minimal sedation. Subject shows appropriate temperament indicators. I was not a child to them. I was inventory. The ship that carried me away was immense, a dagger thrust against the stars. Inside, every corridor gleamed with the same polished durasteel, every door hissed with the same hydraulic sigh. I lost myself in those passages several times, only to be roughly redirected by droids programmed for efficiency rather than comfort. The windows grew fewer as we descended into the bowels of the vessel. I learned later this was intentional, to begin the process of disconnection from the outside world. Severing ties is always the first lesson. Dromund Kaas revealed itself through viewport slits as we made our final approach, a world perpetually shrouded in storm clouds, lightning tearing across its atmosphere in violent bursts. The planet itself seemed angry. I pressed my small hands against the cold transparisteel, watching bolts of energy illuminate the jungle canopy below. Something inside me responded to that anger, a quiet resonance I had never felt before. The spaceport stank of fuel and ozone. Red light bathed everything in a bloody glow that painted the shadows deep crimson. Guards in dark armor flanked our path, their faces hidden behind masks designed to intimidate rather than protect. Their presence was not for my safety, but to ensure I reached my destination. Potential apprentices had been known to run. They never made it far. The Sith Academy rose from the jungle like a temple to pain. Black stone carved into sharp angles that defied natural architecture, towers that clawed at the lightning-torn sky. Massive statues of ancient lords stood sentinel at the entrance, their faces worn smooth by rain yet somehow still radiating malevolence. No one welcomed me. No one spoke as I was led through halls decorated with trophies I would later learn were the remains of those who had failed their trials. My quarters were Spartan, a narrow bed, a wash basin, a small desk. The windows were high and narrow, allowing only thin blades of red-tinged light to penetrate the gloom. The door had no interior locking mechanism. Privacy, like childhood, was a luxury I had surrendered upon arrival. That first night, I lay awake listening to the distant sounds of the academy. Mechanical hums of air circulators, the occasional echo of footsteps, and sometimes, just sometimes, what might have been screams. I clutched my thin blanket and remembered my mother's face as she pressed her hand against mine for the last time. I did not cry. Something told me tears would not be tolerated in this place. Sleep finally claimed me just before dawn. I dreamed of home, of golden fields and blue skies. I woke to find a dark-robed figure standing silently at the foot of my bed. Lord Senex had come to inspect his new acquisition. His face was a network of scars and implants, his eyes a sickly yellow that seemed to glow in the dim light. He did not speak, merely observed me as one might study an insect pinned to a board. When he finally broke the silence, his voice was surprisingly soft, almost gentle. "Are you afraid, boy?" I wanted to lie. I wanted to project strength, courage, defiance. But something in those yellow eyes pulled the truth from me. "Yes, my lord." A smile creased his ravaged face, revealing teeth too sharp to be entirely natural. "Good. Fear is the beginning of wisdom, but know this. By the time I am finished with you, it will not be me you fear most. It will be yourself." He turned to leave, his robes whispering against the stone floor. At the threshold, he paused. Your training begins in 1 hour. Eat, dress, prepare yourself as best you can. The door hissed shut behind him. On my desk sat a tray I hadn't noticed before. Bland protein cubes, a cup of bitter stim tea, a uniform of black synth leather that crackled with newness. I ate mechanically, forcing down each flavorless bite. The uniform fit perfectly, as though they had measured me in my sleep. Perhaps they had. I was not the only child in the academy. As I was led to my first training session, I passed others in similar uniforms, their ages ranging from perhaps 6 to 16. None met my eyes, none spoke. We moved through those halls like ghosts, each locked in our private universe of dread. The training arena was a vast circular space with high ceilings and walls of dark stone. Weapons of various designs hung on racks around the perimeter. Training droids stood in silent rows, their photoreceptors dim but watchful. In the center of the room stood Lord Senex, flanked by 2 older apprentices whose faces bore the marks of experience. Scars, burns, one missing an eye replaced by a crude cybernetic implant. 7 of us gathered that day, new acquisitions all. We stood in a ragged line, 7 children torn from 7 worlds, bound by nothing but our sensitivity to the Force and our new status as property of the Sith. You are nothing, Lord Senex began, pacing before us with measured steps. Less than nothing. You are potential unrealized, promise unfulfilled. Many of you will die during your training. Some will die today. His gaze swept over us, lingering on each face just long enough to imprint his threat. The Force flows through all living things, but in you, it flows stronger. This is not an accomplishment, it is not a gift, it is merely a fact, like the color of your eyes or the length of your bones. What matters is what you do with this fact. He gestured, and one of the older apprentices stepped forward, carrying a small box of polished wood. From it, Senex withdrew a simple metal sphere, no larger than his palm. Your first lesson is simple. Move the sphere. He placed it on the ground before us, then stepped back, clasping his hands behind him. We stared at the sphere, then at each other. None of us moved. Perhaps I was unclear, Senex said, his soft voice hardening. Move the sphere or die where you stand. The air in the room changed, charged suddenly with panic. A girl to my left, perhaps a year younger than me, began to cry silently. A boy at the far end of the line dropped to his knees, reaching for the sphere with trembling hands. Not with your hands, Senex said. With a casual gesture, he lifted the boy into the air, clutching his throat through the Force. With your mind. With your hatred. With your fear. The boy kicked helplessly, his face purpling as he clawed at invisible fingers. The rest of us watched in horror as his struggles weakened. I felt something build inside me then, a pressure behind my eyes, a ringing in my ears. The sphere before us seemed to pulse in my vision, its metallic surface reflecting the red emergency lights that had begun to flash in response to the boy's fading life signs. Move. The word formed in my mind, not as language but as pure intent. Move or he dies. Move or we all die. The sphere twitched, rolled perhaps a centimeter. Not enough. The boy's eyes were bulging now, his lips blue. The pressure inside me grew, became pain, became rage. This was not fair. This was not right. This was the sphere shot across the floor, ricocheting off the far wall with a sound like a gunshot. The boy fell to the ground, gasping and retching. Lord Senex turned his yellow gaze to me. Interesting, he said. The others tried after that. The crying girl managed to rock the sphere back and forth. Another boy rolled it halfway across the room. 2 failed entirely, their faces contorted with effort and desperation. Senex killed them both without ceremony, snapping their necks with a gesture. Their bodies were dragged away by droids, leaving dark smears on the stone floor. Remember their faces, Senex told us as we stared at those smears. Remember that failure has only one outcome here. That night, I did not sleep. I sat on my bed, staring at my hands, trying to understand what had happened in that room. I had moved the sphere, saved a life, maybe saved my own. But the feeling that had surged through me in that moment, it was not relief or satisfaction. It was power, raw and intoxicating. I should have been horrified at the casual murder I had witnessed. I should have wept for the children who now lay cooling in some academy morgue. Instead, I found myself wondering what else I might be capable of, what else I might move, control, destroy. This, I would learn, was also part of the lesson. Days bled into weeks, weeks into months. Our training intensified, physical conditioning that pushed our young bodies to breaking points. Force exercises that left us vomiting from exertion, combat drills where failure meant pain, success meant watching others suffer. We learned to channel our fear, our anger, our hatred. We learned that compassion was weakness, that attachment was vulnerability. The number of apprentices dwindled steadily. Some failed their trials. Some died in training accidents that perhaps were not accidents at all. Some simply disappeared overnight, their quarters emptied, their names never spoken again. I survived. I excelled. I learned to take pride in my progress, even as I loathed what I was becoming. Lord Senex watched me with growing interest. He began to single me out for special instruction, private lessons in his personal chambers where ancient Sith texts lined the walls and artifacts of dark power pulsed in locked cabinets. He taught me to feel the Force not as some mystical energy, but as a tool, a weapon, an extension of my will. The Jedi speak of the Force as if it were a benevolent deity, he told me once, as I struggled to maintain a shield of energy against his relentless lightning attacks. They serve the Force. We make the Force serve us. My skin blistered and cracked under the assault. I tasted blood where I had bitten my tongue, but I held the shield, fueled by pain and determination. Good, he said, ceasing his attack. Your hatred makes you strong, but never forget, my apprentice. In the end, there is only power and those strong enough to wield it. I was 12 when I built my first lightsaber. 4 years of training, of breaking and remaking, had transformed me from a frightened child into something harder, sharper. The crystal at the heart of the weapon was blood red, resonating with the darkness I had cultivated within myself. When the blade first sprang to life, its crimson glow illuminating my face, I felt a surge of completion. This was who I was now. This was what I had become. The day after I completed my lightsaber, Lord Senex summoned me to the training arena. Waiting there was another apprentice, a boy named Tarvek who had arrived at the academy the same day as me. We had never been friends. Such attachments were discouraged, but we had shared the unique bond of survivors. He too held a newly constructed lightsaber. Only one of you will leave this room, Senex announced without preamble. Prove your worth. We ignited our blades simultaneously, twin columns of red light humming with lethal energy. For a moment, we simply stared at each other, recognition and resignation passing between us. Then training took over. We fought with all the skill and savagery our years at the academy had instilled in us. Lightsabers clashed and sparked, the smell of ozone and sweat filling the air. Tarvek was taller, stronger, but I was quicker, more precise. We were evenly matched, our styles honed by the same brutal instructors. The duel stretched on, minutes bleeding into an hour. Exhaustion began to take its toll. Our movements slowed, our reactions dulled, mistakes crept in. Tarvek scored a burning line across my shoulder. I singed his leg in return. Pathetic, Senex commented from the sidelines. I expected better from both of you. Shame and anger flared within me. I had not endured 4 years of hell to be found wanting now. I reached deeper into my reservoir of hatred, drawing on memories of every humiliation, every pain inflicted upon me in this place. Tarvek must have seen something change in my eyes. He hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. It was enough. My blade found his heart. His eyes widened in shock, then dimmed as life fled his body. He crumpled to the floor, his lightsaber deactivating as it fell from lifeless fingers. I stood over him, my chest heaving, my body trembling with adrenaline and emotion. I had killed before, during training exercises and survival tests in the jungles, but never like this. Never someone who had walked the same path as me, suffered the same torments. Collect his lightsaber. Senex instructed. The crystal may prove useful to you. I bent down, my fingers closing around the still warm hilt. As I straightened, a wave of dizziness washed over me. The room seemed to tilt and spin. Tarvek's blood pooled beneath my boots, reflecting the red emergency lights that always seemed to be flashing somewhere in the academy. "You feel it, don't you?" Senex asked, his voice almost gentle. "The power of taking a life through the Force. It changes you, strengthens you. This is the way of the Sith." I nodded, unable to speak. The truth was, I did feel stronger. The Force surged through me with renewed vigor, feeding on the dark act I had committed. This too was part of the lesson. Death fuels power. Power enables survival. Survival is everything. "You are progressing well, my apprentice," Senex said, placing a hand on my shoulder. His touch was cold, even through the material of my uniform. "Soon, you will be ready for the next phase of your training." I did not ask what this next phase entailed. I had learned long ago that questions were rarely rewarded with answers, only with more tests. That night, I dreamed of Tarvek. Not as he had been in death, eyes vacant and chest smoking from my blade's entry, but as he had been when we first arrived, a frightened child trying desperately to appear brave. In my dream, he asked me why I had killed him. I had no answer to give. I woke to find my pillow wet with tears. This weakness shamed me more than any failure in training ever had. I spent the remainder of the night in meditation, purging myself of such dangerous sentiment. By morning, I had buried the memory of Tarvek beneath layers of mental shielding, just as his body would be buried in the Academy's unmarked graveyard. The next phase of my training proved to be excursions beyond the Academy walls. Lord Senex began taking me on missions throughout the Empire, serving as his shadow and his instrument. We traveled to worlds I had only read about in tactical briefings. Magnificent ecumenopolises where the privileged lived in luxury while the underclasses suffered in darkness. Desolate mining colonies where workers toiled until death for the glory of the Empire. Military installations where new weapons were tested on unwilling subjects. I observed, I learned, I participated. On Nar Shaddaa, I infiltrated a resistance cell, gaining their trust over weeks only to betray them to Imperial forces. I watched from a hidden vantage point as stormtroopers executed them one by one, men and women who had welcomed me, trusted me, treated me with a kindness I had nearly forgotten existed. I felt nothing. Or so I told myself. On Ryloth, I helped suppress a minor uprising, using my growing command of the Force to extract information from prisoners before they were disposed of. Their screams echoed in my quarters that night, but by morning, I had tucked those sounds away with all the others. Gradually, I began to understand Lord Senex's true role within the Imperial hierarchy. He was not merely a trainer of apprentices, not simply a Sith Lord with a taste for cruelty. He was a problem solver. The Empire's hidden blade, dispatched to handle situations that required a specific kind of subtlety, the kind that left no witnesses, and I was becoming just like him. My 16th birthday passed unmarked, as all birthdays did in the Academy. Time was measured not in standard years but in achievements, in power gained and rivals eliminated. I had long since become Senex's favored apprentice, the only one permitted to accompany him off-world. The others watched me with a mixture of envy and fear. They were right to fear me. 3 more had died by my hand in sanctioned duels. Each death had made me stronger, each victory bringing me closer to my master's confidence. It was after one such mission, a particularly grim affair involving the suppression of a Force-sensitive cult on a backwater moon, that Senex first shared with me his vision of the future. "The Emperor grows old," he said as our shuttle broke atmosphere, leaving behind a settlement now reduced to smoldering ruins. "His apprentice, Lord Vader, serves him well, but there are whispers of discord." I remained silent, knowing better than to comment on matters so far above my station. Power shifts, my apprentice. Even now, pieces move on the great board. Those who position themselves wisely may find opportunity in the chaos to come. I understood the implication. Senex was ambitious, as all Sith are. He saw in the future a chance for advancement, perhaps even a challenge to the existing power structure, and I would be his weapon in this gambit. You have learned much, he continued, but there is one lesson you have yet to fully embrace, the most important lesson of all. His yellow eyes fixed on mine, searching, probing. Betrayal is the way of the Sith, he said softly. Master and apprentice, this is our tradition. One day, you will try to kill me, or I will decide you have outlived your usefulness. My hand instinctively moved toward my lightsaber. Senex laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Not today, young one. You are not ready. I would destroy you without effort. But soon, perhaps. Soon. The remainder of the journey passed in silence. I watched the stars streak by, contemplating my master's words. He had just confirmed what I had long suspected, that our relationship would eventually end in blood. The only question was, whose? For the first time, I allowed myself to truly consider the possibility of killing Lord Senex, not as some abstract future event, but as a concrete goal. I began to observe him more closely, noting his habits, his routines, searching for weaknesses. He knew what I was doing, of course. He encouraged it. This too was part of my training. Months passed in this new dynamic. Senex pushed me harder than ever, testing my limits in ways both physical and psychological. He sent me on solo missions now, trusting me to represent his interests throughout the Empire. Or perhaps he was simply giving me enough rope to hang myself. I succeeded in every task. I eliminated targets. I gathered intelligence. I put down insurrections with brutal efficiency. Each time I returned to Dromund Kaas, I half expected to find my master waiting with his lightsaber ignited, ready for our final confrontation. Each time, he merely nodded in approval and assigned me a new mission. The waiting became its own form of torture. I began to wonder if this was yet another test. Perhaps Senex never intended for me to challenge him at all. Perhaps he was simply amusing himself by watching me twist in anticipation of a duel that would never come. Then came the mission that changed everything. I was dispatched to a small agricultural world in the Mid-Rim, tasked with investigating rumors of a surviving Jedi training Force-sensitive children. My orders were explicit: eliminate the Jedi, bring any children with potential back to the Academy, dispose of the rest. The settlement was remote, nestled in rolling hills far from the planet's modest spaceports. I approached on foot after nightfall, my black robes blending with the darkness. The Force guided my steps, led me unerringly to a simple stone building half hidden by towering trees. Light glowed from within, warm and inviting. I circled the structure, probing with my senses. Inside, I detected perhaps a dozen presences, most of them young, vibrant with life and, yes, strong in the Force. And one presence that burned brighter than the rest. Ancient, powerful, serene in a way I had never encountered before. I should have called for backup. I should have reported to Senex. But something, perhaps pride, perhaps curiosity, pushed me forward. I had killed before. I had faced opponents with lightsabers and blasters and desperate strength. What was one old Jedi against the power I now commanded? I ignited my lightsaber and kicked in the door. The scene that greeted me was not what I expected. No secret training facility, no hidden arsenal, simply a large common room with simple furnishings. Children of various species sat cross-legged on the floor, their eyes closed in meditation. And at the center of the room, an ancient Twi'lek female, her skin faded to pale lilac with age, her lekku wrinkled and draped over frail shoulders. Her eyes opened as I entered. They showed no fear, no surprise, only a deep and terrible compassion. "We have been expecting you," she said, her voice steady, despite her apparent frailty, though I had hoped for more time with my students. The children's eyes snapped open at the sound of my lightsaber. Some gasped, some began to cry. A few, the older ones, moved protectively in front of the younger children. "Surrender the Force sensitives, and your death will be quick," I stated, falling into the formal cadence I had been taught for such situations. The old Jedi smiled. Actually smiled, as if I had said something mildly amusing. "These children are under my protection," she said, rising with surprising grace. "As for my death, that is not yours to determine." She made no move to draw a weapon. Indeed, I could see no lightsaber at her belt, no weapon of any kind. "You are outnumbered and outmatched," I said, advancing into the room. "Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be." The Jedi sighed, a sound of infinite weariness. Such darkness in one so young. "What have they done to you, child?" Her words struck me like physical blows. Child. No one had called me that since I left home. Since I became property, then weapon, then executioner. "I am no child," I snarled, raising my lightsaber. "I am Sith." "You are what they have made you," she replied. "But that is not all you are, not all you could be." Something in her voice reached past my defenses, touched a part of me I thought long dead. For an instant, just an instant, I hesitated. It was enough. The Force surged around me, not as the violent storm I was accustomed to, but as a gentle wave. My lightsaber deactivated, the hilt flying from my grasp to clatter in a far corner. I found myself frozen in place, not bound by crude restraint but held in perfect balance. "I will not fight you," the Jedi said, approaching me with measured steps. "Nor will I allow you to harm these children, but perhaps there is another way." She reached out one gnarled hand, her fingertips stopping just short of my forehead. I could feel the Force gathering around her, pure and light in a way I had never experienced. "May I show you something, young one?" A gift, freely given. I should have resisted. I should have broken her hold, reclaimed my weapon, completed my mission. But curiosity, that dangerous impulse Senex had never quite managed to extinguish, held me still. "What trick is this?" I demanded, fighting to keep the uncertainty from my voice. "No trick," she said gently, "only truth." Her fingertips touched my skin. The world dissolved around me. I stood once more on Dantooine, before the black-robed figures came. My mother called my name, not with sorrow but with simple joy. My father's hand rested on my shoulder, strong and reassuring. The sky above was achingly blue, the fields golden under a benevolent Sunday. Then the scene shifted. I saw myself as I might have been, a young man in simple robes, not black but earthen brown, moving through lightsaber forms with precision and grace, but without rage, without hatred. Teaching younger students, guiding them with patience rather than fear. Another shift. Older now, traveling distant worlds not to subjugate but to help, using the Force to heal, to build, to protect. And finally, ancient, surrounded by those who called me master not out of terror but respect. Passing peacefully into the Force, leaving behind not a legacy of pain, but of wisdom. All that might have been, all that could never be. The vision faded. I found myself on my knees in the simple stone room, tears streaming down my face for the first time in nearly a decade. The old Jedi stood before me, her own eyes damp with shared emotion. "It is not too late," she said softly. "There is always a choice." For one heartbeat, one single moment, I believed her. Then reality reasserted itself. I remembered Senex, the Academy, the consequences of failure. I remembered Tarvek and all the others who had died by my hand or by my order. "No," I said, my voice breaking. "There is no choice. Not for me. Not anymore." Calling upon all my training, I broke her hold. The Force responded to my desperation, sending her stumbling back. My lightsaber flew to my hand, igniting as my fingers closed around the hilt. The children screamed. The old Jedi straightened, her expression shifting from hope to resigned determination. "Then I will do what I must," she said, and from within her robes produced a lightsaber of her own. The blade that sprang forth was not the expected green or blue, but a soft amber that cast the room in golden light. We fought. Not the brutal, direct combat I had been trained in, but a swirling dance of light and shadow. She was old, yes, but the force flowed through her with a purity that compensated for physical frailty. For every aggressive strike I launched, she had a perfect counter. For every surge of dark power I called upon, she had an equal measure of light. Around us, the children had retreated to the walls, watching with wide, frightened eyes. I knew I should end this quickly, eliminate the witnesses, complete my mission. But the Jedi's vision had shaken me more than I cared to admit. Each time my blade swept toward her, I hesitated just a fraction of a second. Each hesitation cost me advantage, allowed her to regain position. The duel stretched on, minutes bleeding into what felt like hours. My anger built with each failed attack, my frustration mounting as this ancient opponent refused to yield to superior strength and speed. I reached deeper into the darkness within me, drawing on reserves of hatred I had cultivated over years of training. The tide began to turn. My attacks grew fiercer, more precise. The old Jedi was forced into retreat, her amber blade a blur of defensive motion. I pressed my advantage, driving her back toward a wall, trapping her between stone and plasma. Victory was within my grasp. One final surge of power, one decisive strike, and the mission would be complete. I gathered the force around me, channeled it through my hatred, my determination. Then I made the mistake of looking into her eyes. There was no fear there, no anger, only sadness, and beneath that, a flicker of that same terrible compassion she had shown when I first entered. My strike faltered. In that moment of weakness, she countered, not with a killing blow but with a simple disarming maneuver. My lightsaber deactivated as it fell from suddenly nerveless fingers. I stood before her, defenseless, expecting the familiar burn of a lightsaber through vital organs. It never came. Instead, she deactivated her own weapon and stepped back. "Go," she said simply. "Return to your master. Tell him what you found here. Do what you must." I stared at her in disbelief. "Why? Why spare me when you know what I'll do?" Her smile was gentle, understanding. "Because that is my choice. Just as what happens next will be yours." I retrieved my lightsaber with a gesture, the weapon slapping into my palm with familiar weight. Ignited it, raised it, lowered it again. "Run," I told her, my voice barely audible. "Take the children and run." I was delayed, found nothing here. "By the time I report back, you must be gone." She studied my face for a long moment, then nodded once. "Thank you." I turned away, unable to bear the gratitude in her eyes. "Don't thank me. Just go. And if we ever meet again, I will kill you. I will have no choice." I left without looking back. Returned to my ship, sat in the cockpit for what felt like hours, staring at nothing, seeing only possibilities that could never be mine. Eventually, I composed my report. Settlement deserted upon arrival. Evidence of recent habitation but no sign of Force users. Continued investigation yielded no further information. I transmitted the report, knowing that Senex would sense the lie, knowing that punishment would be swift and terrible. Then I set course for Dromund Kaas, for the only home I had known since childhood. For my reckoning, the storm clouds of Dromund Kaas seemed darker than usual as my ship broke. Atmosphere. Lightning traced violent patterns across the sky, striking the conducting rods that protected the Academy's towers. Nature itself seemed to be anticipating the confrontation to come. I landed in the private hangar reserved for Senex's personal use. No reception party awaited me, no guards, no droids. Only silence and the distant rumble of thunder. I disembarked slowly, each step feeling like a march to execution. The Academy halls were unusually empty as I made my way to Senex's private chambers. The few apprentices I passed averted their eyes, as if my impending doom might be contagious. News traveled quickly here, especially news of failure. The doors to my master's quarters slid open at my approach. Inside, the chamber was dimly lit, the walls lined with Sith artifacts and ancient texts as always. Senex sat in a high-backed chair, his fingers steepled before his scarred face. His yellow eyes followed me as I approached and knelt before him. "Master," I said, keeping my gaze fixed on the floor, "I have returned." "So, I see." His voice was soft, contemplative. "And you bring me failure. How disappointing." I remained silent. There was nothing to say, no excuse that would satisfy. "Tell me," Senex continued, rising from his chair to circle me like a predator. "At what point did you decide to betray me? When you first encountered the Jedi? During your duel? Or perhaps after, when she showed you mercy you did not deserve?" I looked up sharply. "How did you know?" He smiled, revealing those unnaturally sharp teeth. "My apprentice, did you truly believe I would send you on such a mission without supervision, that I would trust your abilities against a Jedi Knight without assurance?" Understanding dawned. "You were testing me." "Always," he confirmed. "Every mission, every task, every moment since you arrived at this academy, all of it a test. And now, finally, you have failed." His lightsaber ignited, casting his ravaged face in bloody light. I did not move, did not reach for my own weapon. There seemed little point. "Tell me why," he demanded. "Why betray everything you have worked for? Everything I have taught you? And for what? An old woman and a handful of children." I considered lying, considered claiming temporary insanity, mind manipulation, anything that might spare me the consequences of my actions. But in that moment, faced with my own mortality, something strange happened. I found I wanted truth, even if it killed me. "She showed me what might have been," I said simply. "A different path, a different life." "Jedi tricks," Senex spat. "Illusions, fantasies." "Yes," I agreed. "But beautiful ones." Senex's expression shifted, contempt mingling with something that might have been disappointment. "After all these years, after everything you have accomplished, you still harbor such weakness within you. I thought I had burned it out of you long ago." "So did I." He raised his lightsaber. "Any final words, my apprentice?" I closed my eyes, waiting for the blow that would end my existence. In that moment of acceptance, I felt a strange peace. Not the serenity the old Jedi had radiated, but something quieter, more personal. The certainty that whatever happened next, I had made one choice, just one, that had not been dictated by fear or hatred or ambition. "Only this," I said, opening my eyes to meet his gaze. "I regret nothing." Senex's blade descended in a crimson arc. I moved purely on instinct, my own lightsaber igniting and rising to meet his in a shower of sparks. The clash reverberated through the chamber, rattling ancient artifacts and sending dust cascading from the ceiling. Senex smiled, a predator's grin full of satisfaction. "There it is," he hissed. "The survival instinct, the will to power. This is the true you, my apprentice. Not that weak, sentimental creature who spared the Jedi." We broke apart, circling each other in the confined space of his chambers. His blade hummed a deadly promise, mine answered in kind. Years of training had honed my reflexes to near perfection, but Senex had decades more experience, and the dark side of the Force responded to him like an eager servant. "I took you from nothing," he said, launching a series of precise strikes that drove me back toward the wall. "Gave you purpose, power. And this is how you repay me." I parried, ducked, rolled beneath a horizontal slash that would have severed my head. Coming up behind him, I launched my own attack, only to have it casually deflected. "You took everything from me," I countered, feeling anger rise within me once more. "My home, my family, my choices. I made you Sith," he spat. punctuating each word with a vicious strike. I elevated you above the common rabble, gave you the power to reshape worlds. Our blades locked, faces inches apart, his breath hot and sour against my skin. You made me a slave, I whispered. Rage contorted his features. He disengaged, then hit me with a wave of force energy that sent me crashing into a display case. Ancient Sith artifacts clattered to the floor around me, some shattering upon impact. I felt glass shards pierce my back, warm blood soaking my robes. You ungrateful child, Senex growled, advancing slowly, savoring my pain. Everything I have done has been to make you stronger. Every humiliation, every pain, every kill, all to forge you into a weapon worthy of wielding. I struggled to my feet, using my lightsaber as a support. Blood dripped onto the polished stone floor, creating patterns like dark red constellations. A weapon, I repeated, tasting copper on my tongue. That is all I have ever been to you, a tool, a means to an end. What else should you be? He asked, genuinely perplexed. What else is there? In that moment, I saw Senex clearly for perhaps the first time, not as the all-powerful master, the architect of my suffering, but as a broken thing himself, a product of the same system that had created me, twisted by the same dark philosophies. Trapped in the same cycle of domination and betrayal, I felt something unexpected surge within me. Not hatred, not fear, not even anger, but pity. Senex must have sensed this shift. His yellow eyes widened, then narrowed in fury. "Do not dare," he hissed. "Do not dare feel sorry for me." He attacked with renewed vigor, all pretense of toying with me abandoned. His lightsaber became a crimson blur, striking from angles that seemed physically impossible. I defended desperately, giving ground, knowing that each step back brought me closer to walls that would allow no retreat. Pain blossomed as his blade scored my arm, my thigh, a glancing blow across my ribs that seared flesh and filled the air with the stench of burning meat. I was outmatched, had always been outmatched. This was not a test I was meant to survive. My back hit cold stone, nowhere left to run. Senex paused, savoring his victory. "Such potential," he said, almost regretfully, "wasted on a weak heart." He drew back his arm for the killing blow. In that suspended moment, as death reached for me, the old Jedi's words echoed in my mind. There is always a choice. Time seemed to slow. I saw the arc of Senex's blade with perfect clarity, calculated its trajectory, knew exactly where it would strike, and in that crystalline moment of awareness, I made my choice. I did not try to parry. I did not attempt to dodge. Instead, I deactivated my lightsaber and dropped to one knee, head bowed as if in final submission. Senex's strike, committed and powerful, missed where my head had been a heartbeat before. The momentum of his swing left him temporarily off balance, his guard open for less than a second. It was enough. My lightsaber reignited as I surged upward, the crimson blade piercing Senex's chest where his black heart beat. His eyes widened in shock, then understanding, then something that might almost have been pride. "Well played," he whispered, blood bubbling between his lips. My final lesson served its purpose after all. I extinguished my blade, catching his body as it fell, lowered him to the floor with a gentleness I had never shown him in life. His yellow eyes fixed on mine, already growing dim. "What was it?" I asked. "Your final lesson?" A smile twisted his ruined face. "The rule of two. The apprentice must always surpass the master. You could only truly become Sith by destroying me. And if I had continued to serve you faithfully, then you would have proven yourself unworthy, and I would have disposed of you." His breath rattled in his chest. "But now you have earned your place. My legacy continues through you." I shook my head slowly. "No, your legacy ends here." Confusion flickered across his dying features. "What do you mean?" "I am leaving," I said simply. "The Academy, the Empire. All of it." "Impossible," he gasped. "You are Sith now. It is what you were born to be." I stood, looking down at the broken figure of the man who had defined my existence for so long. "It is what you made me. But as the Jedi said, that is not all I am." Anger flashed in those fading yellow eyes. "Fool, where will you go? The Empire will hunt you. The remaining Sith will sense your power and seek to control or destroy you. The Jedi will never accept what you have become." "I don't know," I admitted. "But for the first time since I was taken from my home, the choice will be mine." Senex's laugh was a wet, gurgling sound. "You think you can escape what you are, what I have made you. The darkness is in your blood now, in your bones. You may run, but you will always be Sith." His eyes fixed on some distant point, his body went slack. Darth Senex, my tormentor, my teacher, was gone. I remained kneeling beside his corpse for a long time, his final words echoing in my mind. Was he right? Had the darkness taken such deep root within me that I could never truly escape it? The years of training, of conditioning, of kill or be killed, had left scars both physical and psychological. Could such wounds ever truly heal? I did not know, but I would find out. Rising, I moved through Senex's chambers with purpose. From hidden vaults and locked cabinets, I took what might prove useful: credits, identification codes, a data chip containing Imperial patrol routes and safe house locations. Not enough to constitute a true betrayal of the Empire, had anyone been alive to witness my theft, but enough to give me a fighting chance. I left my lightsaber beside Senex's body. The weapon was too distinctive, too clearly Sith. I would need to forge a new path with new tools. The Academy corridors remained eerily empty as I made my way toward the hangar bay. Had Senex ordered the area cleared for our final confrontation? Or had the other inhabitants sensed the death of a powerful Sith Lord and wisely chosen to keep their distance? It made no difference. Soon, I would be gone from this place of suffering. In the hangar, I bypassed my personal starfighter, too easily tracked, and instead chose an unmarked shuttle used for supply runs. Slicing into its systems, I disabled the tracking beacon and reconfigured the identification transponder to register as a civilian vessel. It would not fool a dedicated Imperial scan, but might allow me to slip past routine patrols. As I completed the pre-flight sequence, a presence at the edge of my awareness gave me pause. Turning, I saw a figure standing in the hangar entrance. Vex, one of the senior apprentices, a Zabrak male whose face was a map of ritual scarification overlaid on the natural patterns of his species. His eyes, cold and calculating, took in the scene, my injured state, the shuttle preparations. "Lord Senex is dead," he stated, not a question but a confirmation of what he had undoubtedly sensed through the Force. I said nothing, my hand moving to where my lightsaber would normally hang, finding only empty air. "You killed him." Again, not a question. By rights, his title, his position, his power should now be yours. I watched him warily. Vex had always been ambitious, ruthless even by Academy standards. He had never hidden his desire to be Senex's chosen apprentice, a position I had usurped through my rapid progress. "Yet you are fleeing," he continued, taking a step forward, "abandoning your rightful place." "It was never my place," I said, voice steady despite the pain of my injuries, "just as it was never truly his. We are all just pieces in a game played by those above us." Vex's hand moved to his lightsaber. "If you renounce your claim, then the position falls to the next strongest, to me." I tensed, preparing for yet another fight, one I was in no condition to win, but instead of attacking, Vex simply activated his lightsaber and held it before him in formal salute. "Go," he said, his voice flat. "I will give you 1 hour before I announce Senex's death and my ascension. After that, you are prey like any other traitor to the Empire." I studied his face, searching for the trap. Why? A cold smile twisted his tattooed features. Because when I kill Senex's killer and claim his place, the victory should be worthy of song, not the execution of a wounded, cornered animal. Pride, arrogance, the eternal weakness of the Sith. Yet in this moment, it would save my life. I nodded once, acknowledgement and farewell, turned back to the shuttle, completed the startup sequence with practiced efficiency. As the engines hummed to life and the landing struts retracted, I allowed myself one last look at the academy that had been my prison and my forge. Dark stone against a darker sky, lightning illuminating the sharp angles and forbidding towers. How many children had passed through those gates, been broken and remade within those walls? How many more would suffer the same fate? For an instant, I considered turning the shuttle's weapons on the structure, reducing it to rubble, ending the cycle of pain at its source. But no, such an attack would be futile, a symbolic gesture at best. The Academy was merely a symptom of a larger disease, one that had infected the galaxy long before my birth and would likely persist long after my death. I could not save everyone. Today, I would focus on saving myself. The shuttle rose, breaking free of Dromund Kaas's gravity well. Above the storm clouds, the sky gave way to the infinite black of space, scattered with the cold light of distant stars. I plotted a course, not to any specific destination but simply away, as far from Imperial space as the shuttle's fuel reserves would allow. As the hyperdrive engaged and the stars stretched into lines of brilliant light, I allowed myself a moment of reflection. The future was uncertain, fraught with danger. Senex was right, the Empire would hunt me. Former allies would become pursuers. I had no friends, no sanctuary, only the skills bred into me through years of brutal training. Yet despite these grim realities, I felt something I had not experienced since childhood. A lightness, an opening, a sense of possibility. For the first time in my memory, there was no master dictating my actions, no test to pass, no mission to complete. Just the vast galaxy before me, and choices, endless choices, all mine to make. I had been forged in darkness, shaped by cruelty, intended as a weapon of terror and control. But weapons can be turned against their wielders, darkness can give birth to light, and even a creature of the Sith can choose a different path. The hyperdrive hummed, carrying me away from all I had known, toward whatever awaited beyond the stars. I did not know if redemption was possible for one who had done the things I had done. I did not know if Senex's final warning would prove prophetic, if the darkness he had cultivated within me would ultimately consume whatever good remained. But I would find out. One day, one choice at a time, the future, at last, was mine. The shuttle disappeared into hyperspace, leaving behind Dromund Kaas and its perpetual storms. In the Academy, Vex stood over the body of his former master, contemplating the power that would soon be his. In distant reaches of the galaxy, Imperial agents would soon receive orders to hunt down a traitor. On a small agricultural world, an old Jedi and her students continued their journey to safety, unaware that their encounter with a Sith apprentice had altered the course of a life, and perhaps, in some small way, the balance of the Force itself. And somewhere between the stars, I began my journey. Not to redemption, perhaps that was asking too much, but to freedom, to possibility, to whatever future I might forge with my own hands, beyond the shadow of the Sith. I had been called many things in my short life: subject, apprentice, weapon, executioner. Now, for the first time, I would discover who I truly was.